Most African Americans believe their DNA is 73.2% African, 24% European, and 0.8% Native American. Genetic studies from places like 23andMe and Ancestry.com back this up. It's a breakdown that points to one idea. They're mainly descendants of black slaves brought from Africa centuries ago. That's the story taught in schools, the one that feels familiar. But it's not the whole truth. Studies claim 98% of African Americans actually have roots in Native American ancestry, specifically Black Indians. Not 0.8%, but nearly all of them. This isn't a mistake. The script says it's a deliberate distortion. Tens of millions of native Black Americans lived here before Christopher Columbus arrived in 1492. They didn't just disappear. They were shipped off, exploited, and later brought back, labeled as African slaves. The slave trade you've been taught Africa to America is backwards. This video uncovers that suppressed history and the reasons it's been buried. Before Christopher Columbus landed on October 12, 1492, tens of millions of native Black Americans, or Black Indians, lived across the Americas. That's a huge number, maybe an exaggeration, but it paints a picture of a massive population thriving here. Then, right after 1492, they vanish from the history books, you know. Where did they go? The script says many were shipped off to Europe and Africa as Indian slaves. Not just a few, but a lot of them. And here's the twist. Those same Black Indians were later brought back to America, only now they were called African slaves. This flips everything you've been taught. The slave trade wasn't just Africa to America. The script insists it's the other way around, and we've been told it backwards all along. European powers were all in on this. England, France, and Spain used Indian slaves for heavy lifting, building towns, working plantations, and digging in mines. This went on from the 1500s through the 1700s. They didn't keep them local either. These slaves got sent everywhere. The Caribbean, places like Barbados, Martinique, and Guadeloupe, plus outposts in Europe and other colonies. The script calls it exploitation on a massive scale, and the records back it up, especially from South Carolina. That colony, set up in 1670, has some of the clearest evidence. Between 1650 and 1730, at least 50,000 Indians got shipped out to English Caribbean spots. That's a low-end estimate. It could be way more. And get this, from 1670 to 1717, more Indians were exported than Africans were brought in. The script says 30,000 to 50,000 Indian slaves went out, while maybe 20,000 Africans came in during that time. A lot of those shipments, hidden. The English dodged taxes and tariffs by keeping them off the books. This wasn't some small operation either. The Indian slave trade stretched across the continent. From New Mexico, which was Spanish territory back in the 1500s, all the way up to the Great Lakes, every tribe got tangled up in it. Some were captives, some were traders, but no one escaped it. The script says this ran from 1520, when the Spanish started, clear through to the late 1700s. That's over 250 years of moving people around, breaking communities, and rewriting the story. So when you hear about the slave trade, it's not just ships from Africa. It's Black Indians leaving America first, then coming back with a new label. That's the history the script wants you to see. Southern coastal tribes like the Yamasee and Gwali took a brutal hit in the 1600s and 1700s. The script says slavery wiped them out more than war or disease ever did. Entire communities along the coast got hollowed out, not just by fighting or smallpox, but by being rounded up and sold off. Then there's this law from November 12, 1704 in Carolina. It forced Indian slaves to fight in colonial wars, way before the American Revolution kicked off in 1775. These weren't volunteers. They were conscripted, dragged into battles to protect the same colonies enslaving them. Take the Pequot War as an example. On May 26, 1637, in Connecticut, 300 Pequots got massacred by English colonists and their allies. The survivors didn't get a break. Massachusetts records show they were sold into slavery and shipped straight to Bermuda. This wasn't a one-off. Ports like Boston and Salem in Massachusetts, Mobile in Alabama, and New Orleans in Louisiana were buzzing with this trade from 1630 to 1700. From there, Indian slaves went all over. Barbados for the English, Martinique and Guadeloupe for the French, the Antilles for the Dutch, plus spots like the Bahamas, New York, and Antigua. The script calls these places breaking grounds, where people got shuffled again or broken down completely. The English got crafty with it too. Starting around 1720, they teamed up with the Chickasaw in Georgia. The Chickasaw were surrounded by enemies, so they raided tribes in the lower Mississippi Valley, capturing 10,000 to 15,000 people between 1720 and 1750. Those captives sold to the English. The goal was simple: keep the French in Louisiana from arming those natives. The script says the English saw this as civilizing them, a better move than the French missionaries preaching and praying. It's grim irony, turning one group into slavers to control another. But Indian slaves weren't easy to hold on to. If they stayed close to home, they'd slip away, disappearing into nearby tribes who'd take them in. On long trips across the Atlantic, they dropped like flies. From diseases like smallpox, stuff their bodies had no defense against. The script points out Barbados had enough by June 14, 1676. They banned Indian slavery outright, calling them too bloody and dangerous to keep around. Too many rebellions, too much trouble. This all fed into a bigger plan. Slavery cleared out native lands for European settlers, starting with Jamestown in 1607 and rolling through to 1800. The fur trade up north, running from 1600 to 1750, made it worse. It pushed tribes south, right into the mess of English plantations and Spanish missions in Florida. The script says every move, raids, trades, wars, was about depopulating the land, empty it out, and settlers could move in. That's how they played it, step by step, tribe by tribe. By the late 1700s, things started shifting. After 1780, the Indian slave trade slowed down and African slavery took over. From 1700 to 1808, about 12 million Africans got shipped to the Americas, hitting its peak. The script says that's when the switch happened. Indian slaves weren't the focus anymore, but something else was brewing. Native women started marrying the African slaves coming in. Their kids were mixed race, and over time, that native side of their identity just faded away. It didn't disappear on its own, though. The colonial system made sure of that. In Virginia, after the 1705 Slave Act, records got messy. If someone was listed as Indian on a birth or death certificate, that label often got scratched out and replaced with colored or black. Census takers didn't care about the details. They'd look at you and decide what box to check. This wasn't random. It was a deliberate move to erase native roots. Fast forward to today, and you've got whole groups in the Northeast, like the Narragansett and Wampanoag, with native blood running through them. But nobody recognizes it. They're just seen as black, not Indian, because of those old paperwork tricks. It's not so different from what happened with the freedmen. Of the 5 civilized tribes, Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, and Seminole, the script ties African Americans to them directly. Between 1898 and 1914, the Dawes Roll Cards documented around 100,000 of these folks, people with mixed Native and African heritage. Their stories line up. Native identity got buried under new labels. Same as what happened centuries earlier. It's like history kept repeating itself, just with different dates and names. Then there's this big moment in 2015. On September 25th, 645 Native tribes scored a massive win against the U.S. Department of Justice, pulling in $940 million. That's real, documented cash. The script says the government was spooked. They worried more people, labeled as colored, Negro, black, or even left blank on birth certificates, might dig into their native roots and start asking for what's theirs. Land, reparations, recognition, you name it. So they set a deadline, December 31st, 2014. If you wanted to claim your identity or land, you had to speak up by then. Missed it? Too bad. But even after that cutoff, thousands kept fighting and winning through the U.S. Supreme Court and even the United Nations courts. The script calls it a cover-up that's still cracking open, piece by piece. Dr. David Imhotep steps up with a big claim. He says all Americans, every single one, trace their roots back to ancient Africa. Genetics backs him up. Homo sapiens popped up there around 300,000 years ago. But U.S. history skips right over that. Open a textbook, and it's all cowboys and Indians starting around 1800, like nothing happened before. Imhotep argues there's a huge chapter missing. Africans were here way earlier. The script leans on him hard, calling him the first guy to snag a PhD in ancient African ancestry, and he's out to rewrite what we think we know. Then there's Ivan van Sertima and his book, They Came Before Columbus. He says Africans hit America long before 1492, and they didn't stumble here by accident. They had the tech for it, like advanced shipbuilding. Think Egyptian papyrus boats, sturdy enough to cross oceans. The evidence piles up. Look at Olmec art from Mexico around 1200 BCE. Those giant stone heads, they've got features that scream African, not just local styles. Language and religious practices match up too, with weird overlaps you can't brush off. Then there's trade. Cotton and tobacco, stuff native to Africa, show up in America pre-1492, according to botanical studies. Even Columbus's own logs from 1492 mention black people in the Caribbean when he landed. That's not a typo, it's in his journals. History gives us more to chew on. Take the Mali fleet in April 1310. King Abubakar II sent out 200 master boats and 200 supply boats, a massive push to cross the Atlantic. Historian Al-Umari wrote it down, and it's not some fairy tale. A year later, in 1311, the Mandingo expedition fired up another try. The script says these weren't random trips, they were planned, showing West Africans had the skills and guts to sail far. You can see their footprints in the cultures they touched, from tech to traditions. Science doubles down on this. There's a photo from the HMS Challenger expedition, snapped between 1872 and 1876, sitting in the Natural History Museum in London. It shows Africans in Tierra del Fuego, way down at South America's tip. That's not a tourist shot. It's proof they were there. Add in artifacts like those Olmec heads, carved between 1200 and 400 BCE, and genetic hints tying Africa to America. The scripts ping this hard. Africans didn't just visit. They shaped things here long before Columbus ever sailed. It's a story that turns the timeline upside down. African Americans don't fit neatly into one box. The script lays it out. They're Afro-Indigenous, Black Native, Indigenous and Black, or Black with a tribal identity. It's a mix that doesn't play by the rules of U.S. racial categories. They're not just picking one side, they're blending it all together, pulling from old traditions and making new ones too. Think about it. Some use words from native languages, others craft fresh ways to show who they are. It's a heritage that's too big for a single label, and it's been that way for a long time. Since 1492, Black and Native peoples have been teaming up. The script says they built communities and alliances to push back against the grind of oppression. Look at the maroon free towns popping up from 1600 to 1800. Those were runaway spots where enslaved Africans and natives lived free side by side out of reach. Then there's the bigger fights. Abolition ran from 1830 to 1865, tearing down slavery piece by piece. Cross-cultural alliances kicked in too, like during the Seminole Wars, from 1816 to 1858, where Black and Native fighters stood together against U.S. forces. They weren't just surviving, they were resisting, building something tough and lasting. So why hide all this? The script has an answer. The U.S. is scared. If African Americans figure out their native roots, it could spark a wave of claims for land and reparations. We're talking billions of dollars and millions of acres, stuff tied up since colonial days. That 2015 settlement with 645 tribes for $940 million, just a taste. The government set that 2014 deadline to lock it down, but people are still winning cases, digging up what's theirs. The script says this goes back to 1492, when erasing native identity became a colonial trick. Wipe it out, and the land grab looks legit. No natives, no problem, right? That's the game they've been playing, and it's why this history stays buried. So where does this leave us? Are African Americans descendants of African slaves like the story we've always heard? Or Black Native Indians like this hidden history suggests? And if it's the second one, why's their true ancestry been tucked away for so long? We've walked through a lot. Black Indians shipped out and back before 1492. Tribes gutted by slavery, identities scrubbed from records, and ancient Africans crossing oceans. It's a lot to take in, and it doesn't line up with the textbook version. Now it's on you. Pushes this hard. Go test your DNA. Find out what percentage of native Black Indian blood you've got. Places like 23andMe or Ancestry.com can break it down, and it might match that 98% figure we started with, not the 0.8% you've been told. Then hit the comments. Have you done a DNA test already? What came up? What do you think about this history after hearing it all? Lay it out below. We want to hear it. And if you're into this, subscribe to the channel, click that bell, and smack the like button. Goodbye.